As we start this journey, we see the heart of one of our protagonists, simply named Sensei. He's professing a kind of unmatched love for a certain time in his life. It seems like a past life that was filled with happiness and love. It is as if he longs to go back there and exist in that environment once again. Sensei speaks kindly of his loved ones who once blessed this past life. As he goes on, he turns to a little girl who is sitting by his side. The little girl's name is Cotto, who is teasing Sensei about his poetic words. They go on to carry a conversation while exchanging playful banter. As the story progresses, we shift to a different setting that shows another story within this story, one that happened a very long time ago. This embedded story brings with it an intense spring vibe. The sun is up, and we love how different this environment is. In this story, we are introduced to a monk who is seated still in a space that seems to be a place of worship in the middle of a meditation. Suddenly, a dragon appears behind him, out of the blue, and the people around him scream and scatter around in extreme fear of this creature. They then start to gossip about how bad of a priest this monk is, alluding to the accusation that the dragon has appeared because of him. However, it doesn't stir a single cell in his body because, as calm as ever, he doesn't even concern himself with them. Rather, he considers the appearance of the dragon as a measure against some sort of experience he's been carrying out. With this, the people around him deduce the fact or fiction that this particular place of worship that this monk came to is haunted. We then come to learn that this man, who they're calling the priest, is a monk who relocated from the city to the village of the Takao mountain where this temple sits. Looks like something is bothering him, which is most likely the reason for his meditation. He seems to have strong powers that can wield imaginary animals to life, only by the use of his mind. Going by the name Priest Mayue. At the temple on this spring day, we see the people taking a united front, gathering around and announcing that they don't want anything bad to happen, as if in fear of this priest. So let's learn about this priest and why people might be in fear of him. Although he says that the dragon was nothing to fear because it was just a moving picture. As the story proceeds, we learn that in this priest's life, people knew that there was nothing else but his dog. However, there was something else, a little black rabbit watching him in secret. Apparently, this wasn't a real rabbit, but just one that he had drawn on a paper. This little rabbit's name was Cotto, who he had assumed was the god of the capital, who sensed something deep in the man's heart. In return, there was also something watching the rabbit, the Buddha Lokani. This is the bodhisattva whose name meant the eye of the Buddha, and it knew exactly what the rabbit was thinking. As we learn, the Buddha Lokani let Cotto borrow her body so that she could use it for certain powers. She suggests that there's something happening to the priest's heart, and the only thing that will heal it is the love in her heart. So she's given the body of Buddha Lokani and returns to Priest Mayue, where she proclaims her love for him. With this eventuality, Priest Mayue doesn't know what to make of it. He's completely astonished by the turnout of events, and to some level, he even seems confused. However, after a while, he begins developing feelings for Cotto in her new body. After a while, they beget 3 kids, Yakushimaru, Kurama, and Yasa. Looks like these 3 are as peculiar and weird as they could be, just like their parents. It is a strange family, as the narrator suggests, but a happy one. However, not everyone is happy with this, and the priests back at the shrine aren't an exception. Actually, it seems as if they are regretting sending the Mayu to the mountains, so they send him a letter accusing his family of stirring trouble among the people. The general consensus between Cotto and Mayue is that they knew one day that this would happen. They look really sad while in thought, and deciphering the situation, that the kids decide to chime in and possibly find a solution. In sincere intentions, Kurama calls out to his dad, saying that they could go back to the drawings they came from and get reincarnated back to life. It seems like a good idea, but Mayue rejects it, so Cotto suggests for them to go back to the drawings behind the wall, and that is how they are transported to another city that they named City of the Looking Glass. It was a city ruled by Cotto and Mayu, in which they took over a prestigious piece of land with a huge backyard, one that became their home. The children were happy, the couple was happy, and it seemed as though they would live happily ever after. But alas, things shifted when one day, Cotto woke up after a really bad recurring nightmare. This is when Cotto confessed that she'd been postponing her return to her original self, a rabbit. If you remember, Cotto borrowed the human body that she has from Buddha Lokanii, to whom she promised she'd go back to return the body. Given that she had kids with Mayue, it was hard to give up this perfect life. What she feared most was that Buddha Lokanii would come to retrieve her body, and pretty soon she would go back to her old rabbit body. This was her nightmare. So with the priest listening to her lamenting about this nightmare, he offers to go with her and disappear in a way that Buddha Lokanii would never find them. So they disappear, leaving the kids alone. Looks like Mayui, in his stoic self, was also saddened by the situation. With a promise that would never be fulfilled, and mere memories of their parents, the children were left behind with the friends of their parents. This is when the story shifts to the present city of Looking Glass, where we have Yakushimaru, the new priest, who is all grown up and has replaced his father Mioe. Unlike Mayui, we come to realize that he's got an attitude towards this town and feels bored beyond measure. He has different hobbies, such as visiting a little boy in the city and keeping company with a certain girl who is attracted to him. Later, we come to realize that they call this girl Miss Girlfriend. Additionally, we see him as irresponsible. He keeps ditching the council, as they call him, by saying that he's only a stand-in priest. One time, when he goes to take a nap, he experiences a nightmare about his parents where he sees his father saying that he will come back one day. When he wakes up, we can see lightning strikes and fireworks in the middle of the city, after which Yakushimaru rushes in to salvage the situation. As it happens, we can see commentary from other people, giving their take on the events of that night. Meanwhile, Yakushimaru is rushing towards a 3-tiered pagoda suspended on a tall skyscraper, placed in the middle of the city. As he rushes there, he's calling out to Kurama, requesting to be sent up this skyscraper. Seemingly, he's got a hunch that he just can't shake. On reaching the pagoda, he finds a little girl who asks him about a rabbit and tells him she's with the shrine. When Yakushimaru asks her where she's from, the narrator enters with a story where once upon a time, planets intermingled, and the boundary between God and man became blurry. It is a story about a family full of love, whose members were reborn. The little girl then goes on to introduce herself as Cotto from the center of Plane 1, and she's there to find her parents. In this second part of the story, we are still starting with the story of the intermingled planets, with Cotto, the little girl from the center of Plane 1, at the core of it. We hear her words to Sensei, telling him not to worry about her, and she's in the city of Looking Glass. In this case, we start to decipher what's happening here because it seems that this Cotto is from the first scene of the story, and the sensei she's speaking to is from that first scene. We see Sensei bidding her goodbye and telling her not to miss training. She's on her knees crying as we hear noises from all around her commenting that maybe she's not human. As for her life in the city of Looking Glass, we see Cotto going through a series of different classes. She does very well and is praised by the teachers and the priests. She only excels in the fight classes, which seems to be worrying for her teachers and priest. Actually, one of them recommends to the priest that she should be deployed, so they tell her to give more concentration to her studies. But as the time passes, we see her dropping the ball as she gets bored with her other classes. One time, she walks into the empty hall in the school. She sits on an armchair in the middle of the room and calls out, "Mom!" while overlooking the moon. She closes her eyes, and the scene fades out. We then see her waking up and going to the very same room she was in as led by a little rabbit, up the staircase. She finds someone sitting on the chair and immediately recognizes him as Sensei. After a while, she opens her eyes and we realize it was just a dream that she was having. She announces that she has a secret that was seemingly deduced from this dream. When she walks out to the next room, she finds Sensei there, who apparently has just arrived. They spend some time together, and Sensei realizes how strong Cotto has become, gives credit to her training, and says that, as a teacher, he is very proud. Cotto then confesses her desire to find her mum and ask her about her dad, which was the impression we got from the beginning. Sensei proceeds to declare that one day she'll go to that city of summertime, where everything is reborn. Next, we see her at the pagoda, in the middle of the city of Looking Glass, where we first saw her, the time she met Yakushimaru. As we begin this third chapter of the story, we see three siblings, Yakushimaru, Kurama, and Yasa arguing. They're talking about their parents' disappearance, and Yasa is bawling her eyes out. Yakushimaru is trying to calm everyone down as Kurama takes a relaxed and stoic approach to the matter. Next, we see Kurama now. In the present, all grown up and as calm as can be, he is relaxed, meditating, while Yakushimaru and Yasa argue. She seems as the wisest and calmest of the three siblings left by Mayue and Cotto. Although Yakushimaru is the one who overtook the position of his father, Kurama definitely inherited his calm and relaxed mind. We see the other two fighting over who will take in Cotto. As we very well know, it is a straight ticket for Cotto into the arms of Mayue's kids, because they all know how special she is. True to this, the first thing Cotto does is head over to Kurama's temple. It is so huge and interesting, such that she had to be taken on a tour. While at it, she's advised not to try her huge weapon in that space. A rule that she goes against, hits a target, and ends up breaking some sort of device plug. No matter the level of panic that sends throughout the temple, the tour continues. And she comes to understand that the temple is the heart of the city of Looking Glass, and it contains the system that controls everything in the city. At this point is when she is taken to see the priest, who in this case is Kuruma. As they converse, we see Kuruma being as stoic and calm as usual, and not showing that she really wanted her to be there. On the other hand, she is looking forward to it, despite the calm and composure she's exuding. As they speak, Cotto points out that their council of three is quite weird. She replies saying that she and Yasa aren't human. She says that Yakushimaru is the closest one to humanity. Based on their conversation, it's as if Cotto is trying to learn as much as she can about the three siblings so that she can know in whose care she can be. During their conversation, we come to understand that though the three siblings have been ruling this city for a long time, they have never had a guest such as Cotto. This is a fact that holds true given her previous interaction with the people that gave her a tour of this temple. As shocking as it can be, even with her calmness, we find out that Kuruma hates the city of Looking Glass. It turns out that this is a city where there's no way of communicating with the outside world, which prompts her to ask Cotto if she's wishing to go home too. They also speak about Black Rabbit, which is Koto's main reason for coming to this city. This is when Kuruma recommended that the name rings a bell, because it was their mother's name too. She mentions that sadly, there's no way of introducing her to her mother because she wasn't there at the moment. Next, we see an excerpt of Mayu's story with his kids. In this case, the time when he introduced them to each other. This might sound weird, because this family was more peculiar than what we are used to seeing. So, as we can see, among the three siblings, Yakushimaru was the one who was human, while Kuruma and Yase were not. This is the case because the two were drawn on paper and later brought to life by their father. That is why they both have weird tendencies and bodily features that are a lot more different from Yakushimaru. So we are shown the day their father introduced them to Yakushimaru and told them that from that day, they'd be siblings. We see them at loggerheads from first contact as Yakushimaru throws a fit over it, especially when he realizes that these are his older siblings. For the first time, we're introduced to their tumultuous life as kids, which is much different from the way a normal family lives, despite everyone having nuances. We see Kuruma as the calmer kid, without any interest for the arts or sports, unlike her brother. Most of the time, she's learning about the Buddha and meditating. Based on their first impression of the city of Looking Glass, we can actually see how much they despised it, as they weren't at all in agreement with going there. Looks like they've hated this city that their father built and made of nothing all their lives. We even see Yasa commenting on the fact that this city felt better than the mountains from where they came. We also see Kuruma wishing to one day see the outside world. Going back to the present day, some of the temple's appliances are going out of order at Kuruma's temple. His people couldn't be more incensed as one of the controllers disappears into the city and lands on Yakushimaru's house. Kurama's squad proceeds to find it and confronts the family on whose house the controller landed. However, it doesn't bear fruit, even with the guards going after it, relentlessly. The owner of this controller, Shonku-san, ends up demonstrating her antics at a gathering in the city after realizing that she has completely lost her controller. As Kuruma points out, her behavior is understandable, given that this was the first thing she made, the time she first came to the city. We learn this during a conversation between Kurama and one of his people at the temple, where they also talk about other projects they are having. Turns out that there's one particular doctor whose extremities prove that Cotto could be 80% Mayue's child, and therefore Karuma's sister. Karuma speaks nostalgically, as though she really believes that this is father's child. As the middle of this story approaches, we see Yasa in a flashback memory receiving a gift from her mother. We then come to learn from Yakushimaru that it is the day of the station opening of that year, and that most people on this day should stay away from her. Given that it is her least favorite day, there must be the likelihood of projecting some unwanted behavior, as we can assume. Given the start of this section of the story, everything seems mysterious, and as if an unprecedented occurrence was about to come up. This is so typical of the plot, and we are used to the many surprises along the way. It makes this next part interesting, as we find out why Yakushimaru is being so cagey about Yase's feelings for the station opening day. According to what we know about her, I think she might try to hurt somebody with her powers. Next, we see Yasa, Karuma, and Yakushimaru sitting quietly in the temple as Yasa lets out a modest cry out of the blue and suddenly announces that she's leaving. When Yakushimaru tries to bring her back, she hits him with her magic powers. As soon as he falls on the ground, he laments in retrospect, saying how this happens every year. As quickly as possible, the opening of the station is introduced as a process of letting go of every bit of waste in every corner of the city. This is why the atmosphere of the city has a lot of stuff floating in the air. Turns out, it happens only by the simple stroking of objects, after which they flow out and float towards the air as though it's billowing smoke. Next, we see even valuable stuff being considered waste at the station, with a pink little creature at work, categorizing all the garbage that they are getting rid of. As expected, Yase is super angry about all the stuff that they are getting rid of, especially a particular cup. That's her favorite. Afterwards, a scene enters with the kids whose house was smudged by the controller, Yakushimaru's house. Among these kids is Cotto, who we now know is living there at his house. At this point, their destroyed house has already been patched up. Cotto gets into a conversation with one of the people in charge of the station after realizing that Yase doesn't get rid of her stuff. So Cotto questions this guy at the station in utter curiosity why Yase doesn't get rid of the stuff that's piled up over the years, since it has been for a long time. A way of getting rid of trash. This question is answered in the next scene where we see Yasa reminiscing about the old days and how they used to have fun as kids back then when their mother was present. Looks like she prefers staying nostalgic, and the stuff from her past that she was able to hoard reminds her of her mum. At the beginning, we were able to see her in a flashback memory, where her mother was giving her a doll that she came to hold so dear to her heart. Little by little, we can see that although Yase is nothing close to a human being, she might be the most human of all the three siblings. She even remembers how, as kids, they had a tree that they would mark to measure height. At some point, while checking out the station, she builds hope that the doll given to her by her mother has come back. At some points, she thinks she has located it, only to find out that it's just a blankie lying on the floor. As Cotto speaks to the guy at the station, she figures out that Yasa was angry about the cup because it was a gift from her mother. She then heads over to Karuma's to try and find the cup. It seems as though the process of opening the station releases trash, but people pick some of the stuff that they would consider valuable from the stuff being released. This is evident when we remember Yasa thinking that her doll had come back to her this very day of the station opening. Additionally, the premise becomes proof when Cotto heads over to Karuma to discuss the matter. She finds the cup in Karuma's custody, who claims that she'd never give it back to Yase, given that it is extremely valuable to her too. This is when Cotto attacks Karuma in a bid to retrieve the cup and take it back to Yase. We soon realize this, as Cotto swings the most feared weapon in all of Looking Glass City. It is the huge weapon that she carries around and wields it whenever needed, whether in times of fun or sadness. Behind her is a troop of people from the city who are backing her in this particular mission. At this stage, she must be harboring a heightened level of confidence, given the strength that comes out in her winner's scream as she swings the weapon. This weapon sends Karuma, with her strong powers, straight to the ground. This is why it is feared, and that is why people in the Looking Glass City, including the three siblings, find Cotto incredibly special. Immediately you lay eyes on it for the first time, you'll see a colourful hammer, as if designed by a girly Viking who loves colour. With Cotto as its guide, it can be any size, small, medium, huge, and even giant. In this case, she doesn't even have to use the huge or giant size form, she basically uses the medium-sized one. After hitting Kuruma, she declares that she'll make sure she gets the cup. When Kuruma hears of this, he throws it up in the air, so far up to make its retrieval difficult for Cotto. With Cotto vowing to get the cup, there's no stopping her. She uses all of her strength and power and runs towards it. Meanwhile, Yasa is in her chambers, reminiscing of the most special moments with her mother once again. This time she is remembering moment by moment how her mother made her demon, kind, which then became her special doll. In retrospect, she claims that, once a memory is lost, it is lost forever. We find this as one of the saddest moments so far, in times that we've seen Yasa throughout the plot. Just then, with her head bowed down and tears in her eyes, Cotto excitedly calls out her name while running towards her. She still has the troop behind her, following her every step, as she heads over to hand over the cup to Yasa. Yasa seems quite excited to see Cotto, but things take a turn when Yasa takes the cup and breaks it, repeating the saying that once a memory is lost, it is lost forever. Cotto goes ahead to apologize as Yasa realizes that this cup was retrieved from Kurama. However, instead of showing appreciation, she gets mad and super violent over the fact that it was Kurama who gave them the cup, although in hesitation. We get the reason why when in a fit of rage she proclaims that Kurama doesn't understand her feelings. Within minutes, her rage manifests physically, and second by second, she turns into a huge monster. At this point, it looks like the three siblings have immense hatred for each other, and it's as if they are sharing the burden of the trauma left by the sudden departure of their parents. The fact holds proof through the experiences that we have gone through in this stage of the story. First, Yakushimaru says that on the day of the station opening, no one should go near Yasa, as if in the belief that his sister will never change. Looks like altogether he has given up on her and isn't at all invested in the future Yasa. When it comes to Kurama, we discover that he doesn't think well of his sister because he says that he would never give their mother's cup to her. Furthermore, Yasa went completely ballistic when she realized that the cup was retrieved from Kurama. Back to Yasa's drama, in her full-on rage and as a huge monster, we start to understand why Yakushimaru had cautioned everyone against going near Yasa during this day. As a huge monster, her body was rapidly developing. The only thing left was for Cotto to land a huge blow on her head, a job fit for her giant hammer. Next is Cotto taking care of Yasa as soon as she comes back to her usual self. This shows that Cotto cares deeply for Yasa, with a cloth on her forehead, as she lovingly watches her, hoping for her full recovery. Once she wakes up, we see her professing her gratitude towards Cotto for caring for her, and admitting that she'll use another cup as her treasure. Looks like she's changed, because she also visits Kurama to express her gratitude. Supposedly, she must have seen the light in the situation and finally overcame her demons. Next, we see young Yakushimaru standing before a burning house, calling out his mother and father, and ends up stabbing himself afterwards. We then come to realize that all this was a nightmare. Without further ado, we get an insight into Cotto's life where she's enjoying her life in this city while on the search for Black Rabbit, who could possibly be her mum and eventually get a lead to her dad. In Yakushimaru's house, she seems to be in great joy and relates quite well with the kids there. It's as if she has found another home away from home. Afterwards, we see Yakushimaru outside his home, fighting with someone, and as if that messes with his mind, he postpones his appointment with the council. This is the council of 3, consisting of him, his brother and sister. Meanwhile, 2/3 of the council, Yasa and Kurama, have already met and started discussions. They are complaining about Yakushimaru and the way he likes to miss out on meetings of the council, as if he's the only one who was hurt. Based on their tone, we can sense that they are alluding to the sudden departure of their parents. They both share their feelings on the matter, and we can tell that they both don't like their older brother. With this in mind, we see the hatred continuing as though their parents' decisions to go away together destroyed their sibling bond. Back to Yakushimaru. He's with his usual crew of kids, including Cotto. They are playing soccer and making fun of Yakushimaru, who in this case is being called Mayue, after he gets hit by the ball. They then mention how funny Cotto can get, which leads to a conversation about the outside world, and Cotto promises to take one of the kids to the outside world. However, it looks like Yakushimaru doesn't like the idea that much, and lastly chases them away, saying that he wants to be alone. With the realization that there's something wrong with Yakushimaru, Cotto goes on to speak to Miss Girlfriend, the lady who lives with Yakushimaru and the kids in the patched-up house. She advises her to save Yakushimaru, which takes us to another one of his visions in the next scene. It's a montage of different times in his life, which startles him when he wakes up. He goes to find out where Cotto is and finds her back at the temple. He brings a scooter and the dog named Inuyama to her, which leaves her elated. They climb on the scooter and speed off into the city to have dinner. We find it funny that she is scared of the scooter's speed, especially in the way she's calling out to Yakushimaru to slow down. Instead of telling him to slow down, she keeps shouting, "Too fast! Too fast!" When Yakushimaru tells her to shut up, she jumps from the bike, causing him to land on the ground. Given his prowess and a certain kind of determination to take care of Cotto and her needs, he gets in the driver's seat once more and they start driving the scooter once again. They stop once they reach a huge field of wheatgrass with an overarching bridge. They speak about Cotto and her intention to go home, and if she felt like doing it then, while riding the scooter. Cotto then says that she'll try it another time, given that now she's got something else to do. As they continue with this, we come to realize something about Cotto that changes our whole perspective on who she is and her whole mentality about life. This happens when, in this wheatgrass field, she tells Yakushimaru how she loves A and Un because they were like her first family. Yakushimaru responds by asking her if A and Un being human bothers her. He also questions whether she could come up with better names for them. Cotto counters the direction Yakushimaru chose with this kind of thinking and tells him that the names A and Un are good enough names. In fact, she thinks that they are powerful names because they mean beginning and end, respectively. They proceed to laugh it off when Yakushimaru asks if people use their family as foot soldiers, and why they couldn't have better alternative names such as Jiru or Taro, where Cotto commented that those names sound like old man games. At this point, in their conversation, they both stop moving and talking while Yakushimaru holds Koto's hand. After a while, Yakushimaru finally breaks the ice, saying he gets why Cotto loves A and Un, given the meaning that's been attached to them, and we understand it too, given that we all come from a place of the need of a family, in a way that they can be there for us in times of need. What wasn't completely understood and deciphered by Cotto is why Yakushimaru alluded to Cotto using her family as foot soldiers. Given her ability to swiftly understand and decipher information, we are left disappointed by this. However, what we see next completely flips the story on itself with what Yakushimaru says next. By the deepest meaning he could ever have, he professes that he'd like to offer his help in finding Black Rabbit. He offers to give it his all, after experiencing another flashback with his mother. He says that in turn, Cotto could help him find his mother. However, we are shocked by the next thing he says, in that when they find his mother, Cotto should kill him. This becomes an obvious fact. There's something about Yakushimaru we don't know, especially in connection with his mother and her departure. Out of this, there are so many questions that come up. Why do both Kurama and Yasa despise Yakushimaru on the same level? Why doesn't he attend council meetings? Why does it seem like his mother's departure affected him differently from the way it affected his siblings? What is the connection between him and his mother? Additionally, from the last scene in this part of the story, we see Koto's view of the world flipping the whole story on its head by the fact that she doesn't mind having parents that aren't human. This lies in the most important premise of the story, in that family is very important, especially when it comes to the human part. It seems as if, although Cotto truly belongs to this part of the world, she believes that anyone and anything that you can call family should be treated differently. In retrospect, we can now clearly see why people in Looking Glass find her special. It is because she has a different kind of thinking from the rest of the people. Especially being as young as she is, she seems unstoppable. Another fact that makes her special is her determination towards her vision, finding Black Rabbit. When Yakushimaru asks her if she wishes to go back home, she refuses to even harbor the thought of it, saying that there's something she has to do. It is as if this vision is pulling consistently, and she has no other option but to stay and achieve what she set out to achieve. What we can at least deduce from this is that, even though young, Cotto is a master enroller and seducer, she can really work Mioi's trio of siblings. In a way, they come to her rescue, even when she's not asking for it. They even fight for her, as if she's a goddess that has come to wipe away all of their troubles. With her seducing tactics, she is able to subtly show that she really cares about them. But she is also aloof and scarce, enough to make them look for her. This is evident when we first see Yakushimaru and Yasa fighting for the chance to stay with her, where they both fight over it. Finally, when she decides to settle with Yakushimaru, Kurama and Yasa find ways to satisfy their whims with her. This is proven when we see Yasa finding her cup through Cotto, and Kurama throwing it in the air when Cotto asks for it, as if to annoy Yasa, who he hates. Given the situation, we see the love between the three siblings dissipate, especially between Yakushimaru and the two, and in the way Kurama treats Yasa. Given Cotto's seductive tactics, we can see that she is a master enroller without even knowing. She has these three talking smack about each other, fighting amongst each other, and most importantly, volunteering to participate in her mission without any promised rewards. As we get ready for another beguiling experience in yet another piece of this story, we realize how. It goes without saying that Cotto is a highly essential part of the plot. Given the web of mysterious and unpacked concepts in this stage of the story, we can't wait but hope for an exciting future for the protagonist and her friends. We are getting closer and closer to the end as we start to connect the dots by the information of how the story started and what happened in the middle. The weirdest thing of all is that this chapter begins with the same dream that Yakushimaru previously had. It is the one where he's standing in front of a furnace, where it seems as if his mum and dad's life has been cut short due to the effect of the fire. This is when he takes a 50-centimeter knife, directs the sharp-pointed end towards his belly and jabs straight into it. Afterwards, we see him being carried by Miue, with Cotto following closely behind. Back up a little bit. Isn't Yakushimaru the first child of Miue and Cotto by blood? As it seems through this dream, the furnace burned down Yakushimaru's house when he was a kid, and that is when he decided to kill himself upon the death of his parents. After jabbing the knife into his belly, Mayu comes and carries him to their home in a bid to heal him. All along, this dream keeps coming back into the life of Yakushimaru, which made us feel like the moment revealed here is one that built the foundation of who he is. Looks like initially he was part of a family that was cut short by a fiery furnace. That is why, as a kid, he had decided to end his life, and that must be the reason he never moved on up until now, based on how he is acting towards his fellow siblings and his whole perspective on life. Shocked at this realization, we begin to see the difference in connection with his second family after his first one was cut short. Originally, one could easily think that his indifference with his brother and sister is because of his human origins, unlike them. We even saw him hating them from the first encounter, and it seems that they've been at loggerheads ever since. When he's been carried into the house by Miue after the fiery furnace incident, it's clear that they are planning to raise him as their own. At first, Cotto is shocked by this, but Miue reminds her of how she's been wanting kids. Once they are within closed doors, Miue pricks his finger and draws on a blank paper, a half-sliced pomegranate. After a few minutes, with his wielding abilities, the pomegranate comes to life. This also reminds us of another moment in this story where Yakushimaru dreamt about this same pomegranate that he was to get his life back. Although, this time, we see what exactly happened right after the pomegranate is wielded. This is where we see Miue giving the pomegranate to Cotto. As she holds it in her hand, Miue cautions her against swallowing the fruit, because it is not for the living. Cotto then puts it into her mouth and administers it to Yakushimaru, whose body is lying on the ground. This is when we realize that this fruit was drawn and brought to life by Miue, to bring Yakushimaru back to life. When he wakes up, he is shocked by the events that have taken place, given what he remembers from before. It is so traumatizing for him that he decides to take another jab at his belly with a knife. But before his death occurs, once again like a déjà vu, Cotto rushes in to save him and gives him a big hug. Her love settles him down, and Miue enters the scene to bring him some food made by Cotto. Playfully, he advises Yakushimaru to be glad that he's alive, given how good Cotto's food is. Afterwards, we see Mayui's drawings of 3 pets and 2 kids. They are also all wielded to life and begin existing as a big, happy family while laughing and playing around. These events shed a lot of light into what we know about the 3 siblings and what we know about how they came into existence, especially with Yakushimaru's attitude towards certain matters such as the Council of 3 and having a family drawn from pictures. Throughout the story, it is evident that he doesn't like being in the council with his siblings or even spending time with them. It is also evident in how he questions young Cotto's affinity to her family, A and Un, who aren't human. This is when we see them in the wheatgrass field before, where they were discussing Cotto's intention to find her family. In retrospect, up to the point when Yakushimaru offers to help Cotto look for Black Rabbit, he seems to be sleepwalking through life without any purpose. This premise holds true, given that he refuses to commit to most things in his life up until this point. We don't see him making a resolve until the time Cotto tells him of her determination to find Black Rabbit. Additionally, it is evident that he has a different kind of affinity to Cotto, his mother, in comparison with Kurama and Yasa. He also has an affinity for young Cotto, who is now looking for her parents, with Black Rabbit supposedly being her mother, even though she sees Sensei as her dad. It is possible that Yakushimaru has a different kind of affinity to both Cotto, his mother, and young Cotto, given that he's human, and for Cotto, his mother, he is the one who gave back his life. Now that we know the circumstances surrounding the formation of Miyue's family, the story shifts to the present day, where Yakushimaru is speaking to Cotto. Since the last time they spoke, there was a very deep conversation. Actually, the deepest we've seen Yakushimaru since the introduction, since he's never been passionate enough to want something as bad as he wanted to help Cotto find Black Rabbit. At this point, we can attribute this passion to Koto's enrollment skills. She is young and flamboyant, but powerful in the most subtle ways. This is because she is able to enroll Yakushimaru in her mission, without even trying. In this stage of the story, we are excited for what the future holds, seeing Yakushimaru this way for the first time ever. As they speak, we see them bonding once again, over the deep topic of their parents and the events that took place pending their separation. During their conversation, they are in a quiet atmosphere in their surroundings, in this city of looking glass. We can attribute that to the cleverness in the plot, of suggesting a calm, quiet conversation that needs an amount of seriousness that can't be compromised. Here, we see these two become vulnerable to each other. Cotto in her feminine, healed and determined self, while Yakushimaru in his wounded masculine self. After all this time, all these years, the guy has not yet healed from the hurt and emotional turmoil he had to experience when his first parents died and the disappearance of his second parents. According to Yakushimaru, it all ended like the priest said, with a resounding confirmation from the stillness and sadness in his voice. He goes on to compare his mother to Cotto, saying that she had the same mirror as her. At this point, we start to realize that in one way or another, Yakushimaru's mother might be the Black Rabbit she is looking for. There's proof of this, because when you look at the previous conversation Yakushimaru and Cotto they bonded so quickly over the topic of looking for Black Rabbit. Furthermore, it didn't take him long to volunteer for Cotto's mission, and towards the end, he asks Cotto to kill him if and when they find his mum. Seemingly, this is an indication that the Black Rabbit Cotto is looking for is Yakushimaru, Kurama, and Yasa's mum, who borrowed a body from Budhalokani and ran away with Miura to avoid returning it. With this realization, it is clear that a great reckoning is coming for Cotto, given her irresponsibility and her failure of returning the body. However, we can see hope through young Cotto, given how determined she is, full of faith in finding the Black Rabbit. Once again, we are excited for a brighter future and what it holds for Cotto and her mission. Most especially, we'd love to know where Miyue and Cotto disappeared to, and how they've been feeling about leaving their kids all these years. As Cotto and Yakushimaru continue their conversation, we find another clue, that the Black Rabbit Cotto is looking for might be the mother Yakushimaru lost. It is evident when he shows Cotto a picture of his mum, after which she exclaims with joy, saying how beautiful she is. As their conversation continues, we are enlightened by the fact that our initial premise of the hatred existing in Yakushimaru's heart towards his siblings was right. We see this as he tells Cotto to be careful of Yasa and Kurama because they don't have good intentions towards her. According to him, they have ulterior motives, and they just want to use her, especially Kurama. True to this, we enter a scene where Yasa and Kurama are speaking about testing Cotto. They converse about her weapon and the kind of power it holds, in a bid to understand her more. One striking thing that they mention, though, is that Cotto could be their little sister. At this stage, they seem behind with the whole thing, given that Yakushimaru already witnessed Cotto seeing their mum's picture and being overjoyed over her beauty. This is an indicator that Yakushimaru already knows, even though he hasn't discussed it openly. It seems as though Kurama and Yasa are worried about Koto's giant hammer, which they discuss at great length, even adding Shuku-san's findings on it. They discuss various theories and hypotheses that Kurama has come up with about Cotto and her weapon. Kurama also speaks of how the results of testing these hypotheses and theories could result in finding the three siblings' mum, the same person Cotto is looking for. Here we start to see everybody's mission is aligning towards a single aim, to find Mioe and Cotto, especially the latter. As Kurama says, it looks like testing Cotto and the finding of their mum will help them find an opening to the outside world. As we can remember, the people in the City of Looking Glass have no access to the outside world. However, it looks like Yasa is confused about the whole situation, but Kurama recommends taking the first step, which is trying. Given that this is a great desire for everyone in the city, Yasa and Kurama waste no time in starting the process to test Cotto. During the Lights Festival, Yasa goes to look for Cotto and uses trickery to take her back to Kurama's temple at the Council of Three. She knows that Cotto loves her and will feel safe around her, so she mentions that she was there to get her. Without knowing, she is transported to the temple and is now face to face with Kurama, telling her that she'll be part of the first round of entertainment for the festival. On seeing this, Yakushimaru gets worked up and furious more than ever. Despite his concerns and opinions about it, Yasa and Kurama proceed with the process. Here, Yasa's job is to keep Yakushimaru from interfering, while Kurama gives Cotto instructions on how to handle the test. As they carry on, Yakushimaru tries everything to stop them, but Yasa's magic abilities prove steadfast over his human senses and abilities. Therefore, Cotto, being the fearless fighter she brings out her giant hammer and takes on the test as her personal fight, something that she has to do. She begins to aim at a certain giant golden structure in the shape of a spaceship. Once she hits it and it falls down, she is transported to another world, where she opens up a door that looks like a portal. Here is where he meets Cotto, Black Rabbit, the three siblings' mum and her own mum, who she's been looking for all along. Afterwards, we see a regretful Yakushimaru, a confused Yasa and Kurama, in the middle of the disheveled temple. They are confused as ever, wondering where Cotto disappeared to. After a while, the giant golden structure that we can now see is a spaceship, which was used to transport her to the other world. This is evident when it lands on the temple, where the three siblings can see it well after Cotto and their long-lost mum comes out. Just then, the scene shifts to the point we left in their previous scene, where Cotto was meeting her mother for the first time, in the other universe outside the Looking Glass City. There, they hug it out and exchange their pleasantries, as Cotto says how much she's looked for her. She claims of the many questions she has for her, given the amount of time they've spent apart, but first, they decide to head home where the reunion happens. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. The moment when Cotto would find her mum, Black Rabbit. From this point, it is bliss and unconventional happiness based on how things go during this long-awaited reunion in the Looking Glass City. The story takes us for a spin in this wild ride of love and joy, where a mum finally reunites with her children after years of separation. However, up to this point, the plot doesn't tell us how Cotto came into being as Black Rabbit's child. What we know is that Black Rabbit borrowed the human body that she has, and together with Mioe, they adopted Yakushimaru and wielded Kurama and Yasa to life, out of a drawing. The moment they reach Kurama's disheveled temple, Yasa hurriedly runs towards her mother, showing how much she'd missed her. Cotto, her mother, expresses how beautiful she's grown up to be, as Kurama also says how beautiful Cotto is. In the meantime, little Cotto is crying, saying how she thought she could have died. Cotto goes on to greet Yakushimaru, who is holding a couple of kids. At first, she thinks that these are his children, but Yakushimaru corrects him fast, with a tonal variation that shows how unforgiving he is towards her. Ignoring it, she says that she's just kidding, and goes ahead to comfort little Cotto, who's been crying all along. Her comforting voice quiets her down, and she agrees to forgive her siblings for all the trouble they gave her when she was trying to look for her. With this instance, we realize that Cotto projects a strong demeanor outward, but inside she's just a soft little girl, even though her power to wield the magic hammer is feared and widely known around the city of Looking Glass. Given the return of her mother, little Cotto suggests throwing a tea party for her. They talk about it as they all walk down the street, as Black Rabbit, Cotto, realizes how well her children have taken care of the city. She goes on to visit all the 3 siblings and is pleased by all of their livelihoods. For instance, she commends Kurama for how smart he's always been, given his ideas and the system he was able to create in his temple. He also goes to see Yakushimaru's house, where he lives with the kids he babysits, with Miss Girlfriend. These kids include Cotto, who exclaims at the fact that Yakushimaru thinks that babysitting these kids is hard. Lastly, Cotto goes to Yasa for a tea party. Later, we see her announcing that, having seen all her kids, she is ready to go back to Mioe. The big reason she gives them is that Mioe will be angry that she came alone, because she had promised her that they'd come back together. On hearing this, Yasa loses control, and as usual, her anger results in a monsterific earthquake across the city, as smoke billows along with it. Next, we see Cotto revealing to young Cotto that the last the two met, she was just a little baby. This was right before she left the city, with Mioe. Cotto then goes on to express her frustration with Sensei and the shrine, given that they haven't told her anything about Cotto and her dad, who presumably at this point is Mioe. Later, we see her complaining to Yakushimaru about how everybody keeps asking her to do things but no one tells her anything. Meanwhile, Kurama is at the temple, reviewing the recent events, and wondering how Cotto is planning to return. Next is young Cotto meeting Sensei again for the second time after they separated, while coming to Looking Glass City. She tells him about how she was able to find Mum, which marks the end of this part of the story. As we continue reflecting on what happened in this episode, we start to see how exactly the protagonists in the story are positioned, given their actions before the testing of young Cotto, and their reactions after meeting Black Rabbit again. While Yasa is in cloud 9 over the return of her mother, Kurama is skeptical about her return. Yakushimaru couldn't care less, and Cotto head over heels in love with the idea of having her mum around. You can just read this from their energy in the way they answer their mum's questions, and their reaction when they understand their mum's leaving again. Next is young Cotto heading to the pagoda suspended on top of the skyscraper in the middle of the Looking Glass City. As this happens, Yakushimaru realizes that something is happening right to the city. He confronts Sensei about it, calling him the priest. At this stage, there are white beams of light flowing all over the city. As Yakushimaru freaks out upon this eventuality, Cotto, his mum, is rushing down to the pagoda seemingly to help salvage the situation. Given her purity and selflessness, young Cotto suggests that she is the cause of this. For them, by the look of their faces, it seems like a completely sad situation. When Cotto, their mother, arrives, it looks as if she also thinks so, because of the serious look that she gives young Cotto. In this case, it looks like she's given in to the fact that young Cotto is the cause. Next, we see Yasa waking up in her home, looking the happiest she's ever been in years. Meanwhile, Cotto and the rest are examining the situation. It's not just beams of light covering the city, but it looks like craters are being created while deep abysses form. It's as if meteors are falling from the sky and destroying the land. Because of the massive damage, everyone is suffering a great fright as young Cotto reviews her faults in all this. She goes to speak to Miss Girlfriend about it, as Yakushimaru also seeks for answers. We then see Cotto being quieted down by her mum as they continue to consult Sensei on the matter. However, despite him being at the center of attention with this issue, he doesn't seem to be bothered by it at all. He continues to act in a nonchalant manner, even when he is questioned by Cotto herself, the Council of Three's mum. Here, we see Sensei acknowledging how beautiful their daughter, young Cotto, is while speaking to Black Rabbit. Through their conversation, we find out that Black Rabbit left Cotto in Sensei's care when she was just a baby. In this stage, Black Rabbit seems to be angry with him, especially how unbothered he is with the crisis. Afterwards, the High Priest, Sensei, Black Rabbit, young Cotto, and the whole crew are all gathered at the skyscraper as the resounding noises of the city being destroyed continue. As we move on, we find out that the Sensei that we can see here is ultimately Koto's real dad. That is why, as he was speaking to Black Rabbit, he used the words, "our daughter." In this impromptu gathering that they're in, where everybody knows the problems they are facing are coming from unwanted visitors, everybody is tense and easily triggered by the other, as if they'll start fighting among themselves. However, it is impossible to get over the fact that Sensei is the one that has all the answers which are to be confirmed by the priest. This fact holds true when Sensei explains to everyone, especially with great consideration for young Cotto, that the Looking Glass City wasn't a city created and brought to life from a picture. Rather, it is one that was created on a plane. Here is when Cotto mentions the 13th plane, which utterly shocks the priest. As they move over to the next part of the real story on how the Looking Glass City was formed, Sensei sounds as if he is the one who created this city. At this point, it goes without saying that Sensei must have taken over Muei's role in this family, in that he is the three siblings and young Koto's father. We then start to wonder if actually this is Muei, incarnated. As they continue speaking, the city is still being destroyed and attacked by these unwanted visitors. They seem absolutely unhappy by the turnout of events, especially when the High Priest confirms Sensei's information about it, saying that it wasn't supposed to exist. As they speak, Black Rabbit tries to stop these attackers who are creating craters on the ground, and also directing the attacks to the skyscraper. However, when she tries to stop them, she's hit, and her power proves weaker than them. To help everybody decipher this particular incident, the High Priest says that it is normal for Black Rabbit to get hit quickly, because all of her power dissipated when she gave birth to young Cotto. As soon as young Cotto hears this, she interprets all this information with an understanding that what is happening is all her fault. The High Priest also confirms that, once she was born, she inherited all of Black Rabbit's power, and that is why she is weaker at the moment. She then begins to sulk, where at this point Yakushimaru tries to wake her up and bring her back to her senses. He advises her to stop being sad because both her parents are alive. He also reminds her that both his original parents by blood died, so she shouldn't have a reason for sulking. As soon as she can, young Cotto stops bowing down and sulking and commands respect from the High Priest by her next resolve, that she will save her mum and everybody in the Looking Glass City with his help. If not, he gives him an ultimatum, that if he doesn't help her, she'll destroy all the other planes. Given that the Looking Glass City is built on the 13th plane, we can understand how detrimental that would be, destroying all the other places on which places like Looking Glass City could be built. Everyone looks happy with this resolve, and astonished at it. Cotto's resolve ends up causing a level of uncertainty among this group, holding it down here at the skyscraper, in the middle of Looking Glass. However, she doesn't seem to care. However, the feelings are mixed. Most of them are happy with this resolve, but the priest doesn't seem too happy. He actually says that it is wrong, and the unified organization decided on the existence of the 13 planets, and that it wouldn't be right to destroy them, as it was this way since the beginning. At this point, we are shown the 13 planets, which are the 13 planes as they decipher this new resolve of saving one planet, without which others would be destroyed. Based on how it looks like this 13th planet seems to have been placed further away from the rest in a way that makes it look special from the rest. As he tries to understand Cotto's resolve, he recommends thinking about it carefully, because destroying all the other planets just because one of them couldn't be saved would destroy the balance of the world. Given that the priest's job and his fellow comrades at the shrine is to keep this balance, then it wouldn't be the rightful thing for him to do. He even proceeds to say that the 13th planet shouldn't exist because it defies this law of balance that was decided on since the beginning. However, Cotto argues that if it is so wrong for the 13th planet to exist, then how was Sensei able to create it in the first place? And why is all her family with her mum and dad all here together at last? Given that the priest's premise is that the wrong thing is impossible, these two questions by Cotto seem to critically allude to him. At the end of her speech, she says that there's no way she can believe that Looking Glass City shouldn't exist, and that she cannot renounce the world that she knows exists. On this realization, to which he agrees, Sensei rushes in to hug her because of her resolve and ends up claiming that he is God. In a bid to answer her question on how he was able to create the Looking Glass City, it was wrong and impossible. He proceeds to tell a story about his existence and how different it was with just him, his dad, and the high priest in existence. He guides Cotto away from the others and tells her the whole story as they walk, explaining why everyone here in the Looking Glass City was created. We then come to find out that Sensei being God meant that they were the ones who formed the first civilization and created the worlds that exist. At this stage of the story, through Sensei's explanation that the high priest is his brother. He also points out the creator was their father and created them so that they could create the world that exists right now. Additionally, it is completely unforeseen, but Sensei's decision to bring Cotto into the world was to raise someone who could become him, and even a better version of him, which, up to now, he has achieved because of the way Sensei thinks and the action steps she's been taking. However, as he continues explaining himself, he jabs a long silver sword into Cotto's heart and says, "Reveal the truth." Everyone panics, as Cotto does the same thing to him, which looks like a new, unprecedented tactic to get someone to open up. Meanwhile, Yakushimaru is having a moment, talking about how much he waited for Sensei. Just then, Cotto hits the ground with his massive hammer, causing the ground beneath to sink, causing major havoc in the Looking Glass City. At this point, we can start to see Cotto and her father, Sensei, as the main protagonists of this story, given that they are the ones controlling everything. Cotto has destroyed Looking Glass with one jab of her giant hammer, and Sensei was able to create this other planet without any consent from his brother, the High Priest, or authorization from his father. However, this does not surprise us anymore because his attitude right now is that of a strong leader, which we can also see in Cotto, which would explain his idea of success in raising Cotto to be like him. With all his might and power, which for us has been newly founded, we can clearly see that he can very well control everything in the world, let alone Looking Glass. Turns out that the plot kept his story away up to this point for a good purpose, in that we'd see the one who is always scarce wins against the uphill battle for power. This fact holds true, because he's been too scarce in the plot. Next, we see Kurama and Yakushimaru staying in ruins, in what was left of the city, as he experiences more dreams from his past. Kurama questions his ability to sleep in this situation as they speak about what happened in the past and what the future holds. Yasa is also sitting around in the ruins and, surprisingly, according to what we've seen in the past, enjoying her time, sitting on top of a ruined car. Afterwards, we see Yakushimaru running hurriedly to find young Cotto. When he finds her, he speaks about their father and how he left a part of his creation behind. Here, we realize how detrimental Cotto's power can be, given how she was able to destroy the Looking Glass City on a whim. However, this part becomes hard to understand since Cotto was the one willing to make sure that this 13th planet is kept safe and sound from any kind of destruction. It gives quite the mixed reaction kind of feeling because it is sad that now the city is destroyed, but what we can clearly see is that the whole crew is actually okay with the situation. Makes us wonder if Cotto's desires are really met up to this point. Let's find out in this next piece of the puzzle. Cotto is now speaking with her father Sensei, in some place that seems to look like a graveyard in the Looking Glass City, while surrounded by all the planets. Looks like a dream as they both discuss their relationship, a father and daughter. It looks like a dream because we can all remember that Looking Glass is already in a rubble. Going back to present life, Sensei is speaking to Black Rabbit, saying how much he loves Yakushimaru, Kurama, Yase, Cotto, and her too. He proceeds to profess love for his whole family in a bid to assure Black Rabbit of the bond that they have between them. Based on how he mentions every one of them one by one, we can now truly see his love for her and the children that they have together. He also speaks about his power, trying to decipher why he is the way he is. He confirms that he is an observer, but the creator, his father, gave him power that contradicts his true potential. He recognizes that he has power, but he still doesn't understand why, in this day and age, he still needs the Buddha's compassion. He seems troubled by this, and Cotto tries to help him understand it. According to her, Sensei is quite a proud and silly man, one who she struggles to understand. She actually thinks that he acts like a child and doesn't understand anything about controlling himself. She also thinks that he is a proud man who cannot bear to be alone at all. She recalls how he gave Cotto his heart and ended up causing her pain. He also tried to turn light into darkness by giving Yakushimaru the prayer beads. Her final conclusion is for him to stop worrying about himself and his troubles, and to go back to his kids and help them. He calmly accepts all her views on his mannerisms and makes a resolve that will completely change the way we view him as a person. So according to him, he gave Cotto his heart, gave Yakushimaru the beads, and without him they were able to make the world better. Actually, he realizes that Cotto got here before him, to further his mission. Based on the way he sees it, everything he set out to do, these kids will make his dreams come true. He then speaks to Koto's spirit, telling her to live if she wants the best for her kids. With these words, he makes her cry and at last asks her not to disappear. Just then, Cotto appears from the sky with her hammer and cautions Sensei against making Black Rabbit cry. She smashes her hammer in, and again it causes a beam of light to appear. Afterwards, we see her speaking to Yakushimaru about the past events, and as they hold hands, another huge beam of light appears. There are people at the temple observing the whole incident. As it happens, throughout the whole city, there's continuation of destruction, where Kurama and a girl from the temple are being catapulted back to the pagoda from the ruins. All this while, we realize that this is happening because Yakushimaru and Cotto have joined powers and created something so powerful that it is causing more havoc in the city. Up to this point, we realize that the one thing that has remained standing is the skyscraper and the pagoda. Afterwards, we see a spaceship arriving, in a world with a different setting from the one of Looking Glass. Looks like, based on the past events, Cotto is doing everything to make sure her family is happy again. This is evident because before going to this land, where Sensei's father is, Cotto had decided to know all about her father and why he keeps disappearing. By this stage, we can clearly see how damaged Koto's faith in her father is. To our realization, and by the wielding of both their powers, they have been transported to the land in which the creator, Sensei's father, exists. In this particular land is where both Yakushimaru and Cotto realize that no matter what, they have to be happy. They make it a prerequisite, and apparently something that they have set out to do. When they get back to Looking Glass, the first thing Cotto does is speak to Sensei. To be honest, their conversation has never been this bad. We see Cotto going through a range of emotions as she demands an explanation from her father, in the way he's always hiding things from her and the entire family. As a matter of fact, she begins the conversation with a lot of anger, especially in the way she says that she finally found him while descending upon him with her giant hammer. She actually punches him in the face several times and he hits the ground a couple of times in a way that it almost seems comical. Things turn for the worse, she starts crying and asking him why he has to keep on leaving without any explanations. On top of the many secrets, it seems as if this is the one thing she cannot take from her father. What we should remember in this instant is that Koto's tears don't come easily, and if she's crying, then there's surely a good, deep, and good reason for it. At the end, the trouble dissipates when Cotto asks Sensei not to leave her alone again. While this happens, Yakushimaru gives the prayer chain back to Sensei, and they also end up reconciling. Next, we see the family all together and enjoying each other's company. This time, they are all here together, the whole family, Sensei, Sensei's father, and his companion Cotto, Black Rabbit, young Cotto, Yakushimaru, Kurama, and Yasa. Young Cotto couldn't be more elated, which is evident in the way she calls out for his father. Even Inuyama is here, which, for the sake of the story, makes good optics. At the end of it all, we can see the beginning of the story mirrors the end, in that there were stars in the beginning, as if there was a daydream. Then at the end, there are also stars that match and a full-on family that started with two, Sensei and Cotto. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.